Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us for a virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy hosting Samit Basu, and Valerie Valdes. We are so excited to have these two here talking about Samit's new book, The Jinn-bot of Shantipur. I always say it oddly, but I've already been listening to them talk about it. It's incredible. I cannot wait to hear more of their discussion. I do just want to point out that if you haven't purchased this book yet, but I mean, you're obviously going to want to after this conversation, but maybe you want to kind of like beat yourself there. Down at the bottom of the screen, we have purchase. We have a link that'll take you directly to buy it. And it'll support our small independent bookstore, which is what we appreciate people who come to these events because it allows us to continue hosting these events and bringing really interesting voices in to talk about their writing, their stories, all of it. For the viewers, you have options for chat on the side. You're welcome to use that to chat if we see anything that is against the rules. Those were accessible when you registered. We'll get rid of you. Sorry, but it's just for the safety of everyone, we're going to be clear. Yeah, it's best to be clear, right? From boundaries. But all of that, if you have questions, please feel free to throw them into that little question box. That will go until that you can send your questions there whenever you want. And then when we get to the Q&A, they'll be waiting for us. I would say don't send things into the chat if you want the speakers to notice it, because that's not what they're going to be focusing on. So if you do want a question or anything like that, make sure you send it over. Beyond that, get ready, get set, because I'm going to pass it over to these two wonderful authors. Oh my God, I didn't even do your bios. I'm so sorry. Do you want me to do bios? Oh, I did that in the weirdest way.
I'm happy so wherever.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Read your bios.
We can just start talking about the book. I don't mind.
Yeah, okay. They're on the event page. You can look them up. You can find the other wonderful things written by them. I'm hopping out because clearly I'm doing great. And I'll be back at the end. Bye, everyone, and enjoy.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Franny.
Yes. So let's get started talking about the book because I loved it and all I want to do now is talk about it. So we will start with like the basic question. Where did you get the various ideas that came together to become the Jinn-bot or Shantipur? It mentions Aladdin, of course, but beyond Aladdin, what inspired the plot, the characters, the setting? Tell us more.
Valerie, before I start rambling about this, I want to take a second to congratulate you massively on Where Peace is Lost, which I read recently and completely loved, and it is amazing. And I okay, I'll answer the question because,
Thank you.
but I'm going to come back to this. All right, so with Jinn-bot or Shantipur, I think I'd been wanting to do a version of Aladdin for a while. And specifically since I was reading about the casting controversy after the Will Smith live-action version. Mm-hmm. And it was only then that I learned that the story of Aladdin was not a part of the original 1001 Nights and was added last minute possibly by a Syrian Christian guy to the French translation, which is why it's a bit different from the other stories. Because it's set in a generic China, which is also simultaneously generic Orientalist Arabia, and one of the villains is from generic Africa. And so it was so clearly, it was like this Orientalist fable that had no home and needed one, mm-hmm. right? Which made it kind of ripe for retelling because it was also a story that in one form or the other is familiar to everyone in the world. Mm-hmm. Both the Arabian Nights version of it and the Disney version of it from the 90s. And I had experienced it in Bengali as a child when I thought it was an Indian story, then in Hindi when I realized it was a 1001 Nights story, and then the Disney version. All of these when I was very young. And every time I saw this story or heard the story, I had problems with it in the sense that I didn't like the wishes that he made, and I liked the story, but I didn't like the character. I mean, I like the character because you have to like the protagonist, but not in the actions that were carried out. So this combination of I want to give this universally known Orientalist fable a home, and also that very rightly urge if I want to fix it. And one of the central problems I had with Aladdin was that the character is just lying, cheating, stealing, social climbing his way through the book and does not care about the city he's from and the world he lives in, except generally as one does.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I wanted to look at, what would have happened if Aladdin actually cared about the place that he was from. And all of this led to kind of, let's set this in a future city or a faraway space city that's loosely inspired by the city where I grew up and heard the story first. And so then it all came together, and once I decided the jinn was a bot, like clearly, the underclass here is going to be robots, and there are going to be many robots, and I just wanted to have a lot of fun with it because the book I wrote before this was a very grim book to write for me, because it was about the world we live in now, 10 years in the future. And so I wanted to kind of do something with a plot and lots of chaos gremlins and a bus full of monkeys, which makes its way into the book.
Yes, that was so great.
Yeah, and so that was my ramble about how this book came into being, and then of course, having set into place some 20 different elements I wanted to work with, they all started getting very chaotic and unruly, and the book happened from there.
And it is chaos, but it is a very kind of organized chaos and a very fun chaos. Everything that happens, it just is, it comes together so delightfully. That bus of monkeys is hilarious because it's like when it happens and he's just like, I don't want to talk about it. You just move on. But so speaking about robots, robot rights are a very core concept in this book. You have the character, Bador, who is a robot. So is Moku, and various robots, the robot fights, all that stuff. And I'm not going to touch AI stuff with a 10-foot pole right now because that is not the same as this sort of fictional AI that we deal with in these books. But how did robots and their problems work their way into this story in such an integral way? You said, once you decided it was a jinn-bot, then it was kind of like it natural that this happened. But how did you make that so important, so integral to the plot here?
I think the starting point of it becoming, of robots kind of pushing their way into the story, because they weren't supposed to be such a big part of the story initially, was that I wanted to kind of, make Aladdin into two characters. One who was human and a bit unreadable, because the reader's gaze would initially find them a bit like exotic Eastern character, mysterious in their mysterious Oriental ways. And which led to the narrator being someone who was trying to look at the character from afar and kind of confident that he could read everything that she could do, and failing entirely. But this along with we're trying to look at fixing society's problems in a world where the jinn is potentially a bot. Kind of led to this growing stream of thought where clearly if robots are the underclass in the society, and the society needs to, and we need to look at kind of the bones that hold this together. Clearly, we have to look a bit more at what drives them, what's their position in society, and what are their feelings about it, because all the robots have a lot of feelings in this book.
Yes.
So then when I wanted to retain that part of the Aladdin character, which is very, wants to be a hustler, wants to become powerful, wants to have adventures and do what it takes to kind of lie, cheat, and steal their way to the top. And I kept landing back at this character who was kind of part of the Aladdin idea, but was a robot and obviously a monkey.
Yeah. Obviously, no, because of course.
Yeah. And these two characters, one the robot monkey, which is kind of half of the Aladdin idea. And the kind of really nice opportunity that one of the protagonists, like one of the observed protagonists being a robot would be, which is that the robot viewer would be able to completely stream their thoughts and understand them from the inside. Because when, I like books where you know exactly what the character is thinking and feeling and what they want. Yes. And I also like books where you have to kind of guess what they're doing from their actions, and they're not necessarily telling you what they want and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And sometimes they're deliberately hiding from your view, from the reader's view, what they're doing, and you only figure it out later. And trying to have both of these characters together, one who will tell you more than what you want to know about what he wants, and the other who will tell you nothing. And trying to have this this viewer, this narrator who thinks he can understand both of them at the same time, and watching him fail entirely. So that's where all the robot stuff comes from.
Yeah, and no, and it works so well because, again, like you just said, it's like Lena is very inscrutable, and poor Moku just has the hardest time figuring her out all throughout the book. And then there comes a point where Bador, who is more readable, more understandable, because there's kind of a direct interface between him and Moku, decides to just cut it off. And then at that point, it is all guesswork, and it's you definitely take great advantage of that disconnect between what the narrator sees and understands and what is actually happening. I loved it. It manifested multiple times in really satisfying ways throughout the book. But yeah, so you talked about how Lena's a revolutionary character, and so this is a novel that is about revolution in a lot of ways. Their love for the city comes out and manifests as they want to make it better, make it a better place. But the book never treats this as a simple, straightforward thing. But what did make you want to explore kind of all these harsh realities of systemic change within this framework of this, overarching Aladdin mythos and story?
I think the starting point again is just that this is something that is not overtly explored at all in the fable, and the fable was something that I was looking at with a slightly critical eye. And it was also, I hadn't actually planned to make so much of the book about social things, oligarchy, colonialism, bot rights, etc. But as happens often, the more you immerse yourself into a place, and they're running around the city a lot. They're exploring different neighborhoods with different visual and kind of city shaping manifestations of the different power equations of everyone involved. And they kept getting madder and madder about things that needed fixing. And I think this is I feel a little more pressure in science fiction to look at how tech influences society, and how the powers that be fail at fixing the big problems and just find newer ways to express old problems through new tech. And this is something that grew on the book as I was getting further into the city.
Yeah, just things ostensibly. I think at one point someone says something along the lines of like, all of these problems could be solved, and they're choosing not to solve them. There are technological solutions to all of these things, and yet they're still just kind of manipulating their little petty oligarchies here and there. And yeah, that was really fascinating, and I thought it worked out really well too. Since we're at the 15-minute mark, I'm just gonna remind people that if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section so that we can get to those once we're through with our questions here. So, were there any moments or characters or plot parts besides the bus of monkeys that you really enjoyed writing or exploring?
All of them, I have to say, because it's they were nice in the note, and they all kind of changed as I was writing them. And part of this was with Moku, I was very, very clear what the track of it would be, in the sense that here is a robot that thinks he's a perfect documentarian and storyteller, and is very confident that he can stay emotionally detached from anyone that he's observing and whose story he's telling, except he makes the mistake of taking on both a human and a robot at the same time because he's overconfident. And then the rest of the book is just him failing at his job. and getting more and more drawn into. And it was nice. It was nice to do this as a writer because it kind of also just behind the scenes mirrors the process of writing a novel. In the sense that you start off with hopefully a firm set of ideas about who people are, and then it changes as they interact with one another and their environment. And then if you've been writing for a while, you learn to embrace this because it means that it's fitting together. And so it was nice having a narrator at the beginning and a core character by the middle of the book who was feeling these same things. It allows you to kind of filter your own writerly feelings about the work into it as you're writing it. So I really enjoyed writing him. Badr was a character, a robot monkey who wants to win a fighting tournament and go to space is always going to be a fun character to write.
Yes.
And all of them really, it's really nice. And this is something that I always like about your work as well, is that you start with types. You start with types, and then a little bit after getting to know them, you realize that there's so much more than types. And I really enjoy it when I'm reading that, and I really like writing it as well.
Yeah, and that definitely comes through your book as well, because again, in the beginning, there is that kind of distance, right, between these characters and figuring out their relationship and how they, interact with each other. And it sort of changes, and they have their own internal perceptions of each other that you don't always get to see and understand. There is a lot going on in the shift, especially with Lena and Zora, that it as it's revealed, it's kind of depressing in some ways, but it's also a very understandable familial relationship in other ways. Yeah, I know that, Mom. Anyway, so talking about the process, did anything surprise you during the writing process for this as compared to other things you've written, or just what surprised you as you were going through this?
I've become used to characters being unruly and demanding more attention as they appear, or changing their minds as they meet other characters. What I think, in terms of surprising me, there were bits where I was okay. I'm going to change the whole plot now because we have come to a point where we can no longer stick to the previous plan. But that's something that's happened to me before, and that's chaos that I'm used to. What surprised me was, I think, a bit was that I was really looking forward to the chaos monkey part of this book, and I was not expecting. And part of this was feeling very tired from just writing about society and politics a lot in the previous book, where I had deliberately not put in so much of a plot with high action moments, and left it much looser so that you could focus on the people and the environment. But so I was really looking forward to having all the rambunctious shenanigans in this book. And there was a point in this book, for example, where I thought there would be many more fight scenes in this book. For example, I'd initially started off with a plan of Badr will go through this whole Mortal Kombat tournament and win. But I think in his second fight, he decided on his own that the way of violence was not for him anymore, and that he had evolved beyond that, and that he wanted to think about power dynamics and politics and social justice. Now, while I knew he would fail at this, it was interesting for me to experience this as a writer, where your character changes his mind about who he is in the middle of doing what he's supposed to do in a way that I hadn't. So that was a big surprise.
Yeah, and then at that point, it's like he's still going to fight stuff, but
yeah.
And there were some really great fights after that point too. It was very funny. But then he did attempt to not fight. It was just kind of like, I've given this up, and they're like, yeah, but we haven't. And then he's like, well, all right.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Oh no, there was so much good stuff in that. So let's see, what else do I have here for you? How did writing this book and writing this kind of science fiction compare to you compared to your last book, but how does it compare to writing like your fantasy novels or your superhero stories as you have in previous books?
I think it's all the same. I'm very bad at distinguishing between genres as it is. because those definitions weren't something I grew up with, and there are also definitions that seem to be changing all the time. But they're also all definitions that I kind of see from the outside. So to me, the core differences between genres seem to be more aesthetic and in terms of just the tools used to tell the story, as opposed to what the story is. So so I don't know what the differences were with fantasy or superhero. I think the biggest differences for me was that I was older. And so my kind of the mix of things that I was focusing on or interested in had changed a bit, but that had nothing to do with the genre of the book. I want to kind of try more fantasy again and then see if it felt distinctly different. Both this one and the last one, which were sort of the science fiction books, were also more concerned with kind of social and political realities of where I live, much more than my previous books, which were, more kind of escapist genre books. But that was a choice that had nothing to do with the genre of the book. I've done that in the fantasy art as well.
And I almost want to talk about the villain a little bit, and multiple villains, I suppose, in this book. But I'm so hesitant. I don't want to spoil everyone on this because it's so good, and you should all definitely go read it. So if people want to ask questions about that because you have read it already and want to talk, please hit that in the Q&A. But I'm going to back up to talking about how long did it take for this to go from like kind of initial idea to publication? And then you said already that the plot changed at certain points along the process, but are you the kind of person who does plan everything out to the nth degree, or do you tend to just let it go and see what happens and improvise as you go?
No, I start out with a fairly complicated plan and a fairly detailed plan, but I'm also well aware that it's going to change. And I'm resigned to that. I mean, I don't think I've written a single book of many books that has actually gone according to plan. And I like it when it happens because it's the book talking back to you, which means that something is working. Hopefully will eventually work for readers as well. But it's not just you putting text in according to a document that you previously made. And I feel like, so again, I want to come back to Where Peace is Lost actually for this, because there's in Where Peace is Lost, there was a moment, I think just one chapter into where the central set of characters meet. Within a chapter or two of that, I knew what ending I wanted for them. Like I knew exactly where I wanted them to be and what I wanted them to be doing at the end of the book. Even though I didn't know the specifics of what that would involve in terms of the world that you were setting up. But that clarity of purpose that I felt as a reader just at that moment meant a lot to me, because it was like the central framing for every event that happened. Like, it's happening for itself, but how is this going to affect what I want from the end? So it's really nice engaging with that But for this book, I didn't know what was going to happen at the end, and I was comfortable with it. But here it was also interesting for me because there were two fables, the Arabian Nights one and the movie one, which I knew would serve as framings for expectations of where you think the story might go.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the endings are quite different in the two things. And you don't know which one the reader has. And I was confident that I wouldn't really be landing at either. But I knew that, push came to shove, I could steer towards one or the other. So pretty much every event that happens at the end of the book is something that I was fairly confident would happen 2 chapters before that.
And then where it does end is like perfect for me personally. It ended again, like you said, it's like I knew where I wanted this to go, and it did, and it was great.
Thank you so much. And it was also, there's some pretty out there things that happen at the end. And as I was writing it, the question was, can I land that one? Is it gonna land, or is it just writer notes for the final chapter, and I was very conscious of if it doesn't land organically, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then I think we can make this work, and then you rush towards the end.
And then
Whereas,
lands.
when I also completely love the ending of Where Peace is Lost, to just loop back to where I was coming from, and there it was like, this completely satisfies what I wanted early on in the book, very early on in the book. And it got there in a way that didn't make me feel at all that I knew the ending, mm-hmm. but it also gave me what I wanted, which I love, which I just always love from.
And I think that is one of the great things about a good book like yours, is that, yeah, you have that sense of like, okay, I know where I want this to go. Is it going to go there? And how is it going to get there? And if it doesn't get there, am I still going to love what does happen at the end? And so, yeah, definitely did on this one. And like you said, it's like it could change by the time you get to that point. But it's nice when it doesn't, and when you can stick the landing of what you wanted it to be. Or you find something better and you pivot, and that works too. Yeah. So is there anything else, as we're hitting this halfway point and questions may or may not start rolling in? Is there anything else that you want people to know about this book, in terms of like the themes, the setting, any anecdotes of while you were writing it that happened, your dog ate it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can't really think of any anecdotes so much as it was. This one has been interesting for me in how people have responded to it very differently. Mm-hmm. In the sense that there's very clearly, some people who like Lena so much more than the others. Bahadur has, I think, been the overall, he's the main character. Mm-hmm. And there is I think a growing Moku subset, and it was interesting to me because I really I had an unusual degree of attachment to all of these foods mm-hmm. throughout. Like I mean, there was very real affection that I felt for them when I was writing it, which is nice when it's because it's been 20 years now since I started, so it's nice to like feel things for people. So I'm interested in seeing where it lands, because what I'm finding very curious is that the robots are clearly winning the relatability battles, and they're robots. And I mean, why is it that robot characters travel around the world better than humans? I mean, I guess a part of it is that I made Lena deliberately hard to understand. But I'm wondering if there's more to it. I'm interested in seeing over time how this evolves.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my opinions, which is that I feel like having set up the robots as sort of the underclass in this, there is definitely that normal human impulse, I think, to side with the underdog. And I definitely felt that as I was reading it, I was like, I want these people to be okay. I want these people to succeed. Lena is Lena, and she's inscrutable and doing her own thing. But I want these robots to be okay. And I was very worried about them a lot the entire time. Lena, I was like, I don't know, she'll probably be okay. She'll take care of herself. But someone needs to take care of the robots. That's what I was worried about. So what is next for you? Is there anything you can talk about? Is it all secrets? Is it all mysteries? NDAs?
No, I mean, well, actually, there are some NDAs. There is some film stuff that I'm supposed to be working on, but I always assume those are not going to happen, which is why sticking to the NDA is always easy, because usually in the end there's not much to reveal. But if those happen, those happen. In terms of books, I'm not very sure. I feel like writing a big fantasy, but all the pieces haven't landed yet, so I'm just going to kind of figure that out. So it's going to be a quiet time in the Basu household for a while. It's just me kind of shuffling about, muttering angrily because I'm moving. What are you doing next?
Oh God! Well, I'm trying to put together sequels for that and sell those, and we'll see what happens. If enough people buy the book. That's the goal. But
same, by the way, in the sense that I would love to do a sequel to this one because I'm still very attached to this one. But again, I mean, if there's excitement, I'll do it. If not, something else.
Yeah.
So it's one of those writer intersection periods that I think we all get familiar with after a few books.
Yeah.
I will calibrate my own excitement as events proceed.
Yes, exactly. And then you're waiting for contracts and you're trying to figure out what's going to happen. And then if it doesn't, you're just like, well, it's fine. I was working on something else anyway.
Yes. This is what I wanted all along.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh yeah, I was over that. Definitely. Sure. Yeah. Whereas this, I love, so speaking of the setting of this, without delving too much into things, it is a science fiction setting that does have sort of multiple planet scenario. And so that is one of the cool things about it, is that whatever happens at the end, there is this sense of there is a wider universe that could be explored. There are other planets out there. Shantaport is just one city on one planet that is going through it right now. But it seems like there is a lot of other stuff that is hinted at in the wider galaxy that you could write books about that would be very different. Would you maybe think of just kind of integrating different, if not Arabian Nights tales, maybe different fairy tales or other kind of source material as your framing narratives for those potentially, or your ideas?
I mean, that's in the notes, but I'm only going to think about it if it looks like happening.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Because I mean, again, I don't want to give out anything about the ending of your book or mine. So I don't want to,
Yes.
But there are interesting. but there are interesting parallels in the point where we both poised at the end, so that whole thing of standalone, but
yes. Standalone with serious potential. It's like, if you give me money, then we will make more of these. Yeah.
And so there's always a sense of, I'm done with this, it's wrapped up, but listen.
Unless.
So I feel like even though clearly we can't reveal these endings, there's clearly very strong parallels between these two books where we arrived at as writers.
Oh yes, the continuing adventures of certain characters that we will not name. All right. So we do have a question. Did you take conscious steps while writing to build empathy toward the robots, and what was that like?
I want to say yes, but also I think empathy towards fictional robots is something that is built into readers of science fiction, in the sense we all have, like, I think anyone could name off the top of their heads their 5 favorite robots in fiction. So the value of making your robot beep boop in the most casual way means a lot more to a science fiction reader than it would be to someone who's never encountered this kind of fiction before. So I did think a lot about, and especially in a world where in real life we don't like artificial intelligence or its physical manifestations, but in fiction we still do. I did want readers to be heavily invested in these robots, but I didn't want to kind of overtly beg for their affection. So I figured that given that robots are kind of cute innately and that they're underdogs, as you said, through their actions and their, that fundamental thing where they are theory-based organisms in over-functional bodies who are trying to kind of muddle their way through a world where logic doesn't always apply, is something that I think does a lot of the work. And then, once you get them in relationships with one another, I think you can feel more or less safe about it.
Yeah. Then they start playing off each other. They start having, you start delving into their individual problems, their collective problems. They unionize. It's all great. It's all just good.
No, I just want to say that sometimes I wasn't expecting, there are a few robot characters in this book who were just there to perform a function in a scene or to provide additional color to the scene. And I was surprised at how some of them were clearly demanding return appearances.
Yes.
There's a few, there's a cyborg crime lord in the city who has a a wife who is a retired sex bot who is now unionized and taken on various kind of more civil society roles. And she just kept wanting to come back, and I couldn't figure out. And she was not in the plan for the chapter. She just appeared as a side character, said a few lines, was like, "Hey, what about her?" And I was surprised that the robots were able to do that as well, because you get kind of used to like human characters with interesting cameos, but this was fun.
Yeah, no, definitely multiple robots that came back. I was like, yes, it's them again. Hooray. I'm glad to see them. I'm glad to see what happens to them. And yeah, no, that the robots in this are amazing. All of them. I love them all. They're all my children. So we are being asked, what are our 5 favorite robots? Dun, dun, dun.
I said that very confidently, didn't I? What are your 5 favorite robots?
Oh gosh. So anytime questions like this are asked, immediately what happens is my brain just blanks. But the good news is that I have some right behind me. So we've got Mega Man. And this is 0, I believe, actually. But Mega Man, definitely one of the top greatest robots. I will go with, for Transformers, I don't know, there are so many good Transformers that it's hard to pick one. Bumblebee's great, I guess, but he's kind of a nerd, right? And I don't know, there's a lot of good Transformers that I like. I hope that you're thinking about robots right now as I'm trying to muddle my way through this question. Who else? Legion from Mass Effect 2. There you go. Legion's another one. Great robot. ED also from Mass Effect. So 2 of mine are from the Mass Effect series. And I gotta pick a 5th one. Who's my 5th favorite robot? Well, now it's Moku, I guess. We're just gonna go with Moku.
Oh,
he's the best. Much. I love him. I would die for him. And I think there's actually a moment where like Lena kisses him and he's like, yeah, I was unaffected by this, and also I would die for her. And I was like, I would die for you, my friend. You are the best.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I got very attached to that little flying Roomba fellow. My 5 favorite robots are Bender Rodriguez from Futurama.
Yes.
I want to pick one of the Star Wars robots, so I'm going to say R2-D2, though I'm kind of mad at R2-D2. Over the decades, I'm kind of, you have been withholding a lot of information, R2-D2. Has been, yeah. And now I will reveal that I was listening to you and not really thinking about my other favorite robots are. But one of them is definitely, there was an old Japanese show called Johnny Sokko and His Flying Robots, which was, I think, either a late 70s or an early 80s show. I saw it in the early 80s as an absolute child. And I think that was my first kind of robot that left. It was one of those giant, clunkily moving, knocking over buildings, shooting missiles out of fingers towards kaiju sort of robots. And I have a long-lasting love for that one. I want to say, and it's a very kind of conventional choice, but Daniel Oliver from the Asimov books.
Oh yeah.
Which also I read when I was very young, and the idea that this was a character that was engaging more than equally with the humans in the books was very interesting, because I hadn't thought that was possible. Yeah, and then can I cheat and pick Hedonism Bot also from Futurama?
Oh yeah, no, that was
it's just a great character. And there's just so much chaos in that. Yeah, so that's mine.
I'm trying to think now. It's like, what are other robots that are good in fiction? I'm like, Super Robot, Monkey Team, Hyperforce Go. We could go just all of the entire robot team of that cartoon. There are some good robots in Marvel comics. Like,
there's Marvin the Paranoid Android.
Yes, Douglas Adams.
That's also favorite. Yeah. I haven't read that in a while. I have to read that again.
Yeah, we definitely in my house will say life. Don't talk to me about life, but in the most deep voice that I can manage, which is not very deep at all, because I'm not. We have another question. Are there other notable similarities or differences in writing robotic versus human/alive characters? I'm going to say all the robots are alive in this, all of them, but they're just differently alive.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is kind of something that is explored through the character of Moku, which is and Moku is a story bot where he's trained in the ways of understanding human character through observation of their body language, their micro expressions, their tone, and all of that. He's seeing them from the outside. With robots, I think it is a fairly it is a fairly natural choice to see them from the inside, because their thoughts tend to be very interesting to explore, whatever the format of story you're telling. And yeah, I think that's the main difference, and it's something that is fairly central to how this book is told.
I think it is interesting because each of your robots does have kind of different physical qualities and abilities that they can use, manifest, and you lean into that. Like that is one of the kind of differences between them and the human characters, is just what can they do physically. And it's not to say that humans don't also have those differences, but in this book, definitely you have different robots who can do very different things, and that's fun, especially in the bot fights. Just different weapons, different approaches to things. Shape shifting. Oh god, the hover car. That was that was so funny. I laughed out loud at that one. Which everyone will get to that. There's so many good Easter eggs in this that I hope you all get to. I just realized we should have talked about Murderbot. How do we Murderbot's definitely an amazing robot character.
I just don't see Murderbot as a robot, which I guess is
that's part of it, right? Yeah.
How good. But yeah, I also utterly love Murderbot, and Murderbot is also clearly a big influence on this book, right? It's that because I started off that list with Bender Rodriguez, and it's nice to see that kind of that chaos inside a metal body, but to have that plus so much empathy, like I felt of all, and yeah, it's really funny though that both of us clearly love Murderbot, but didn't even come up in the list of robots because you're kind of used to looking at robots from a distance, and I can't look at Murderbot from a distance because there is. I mean, I understand from the cover that Murderbot is not just a fully fledged human, and obviously there are those abilities as well, but Murderbot is so human.
Yeah. It really is, and just you're so deeply into its head in ways that I think can be very different. Like you get into Mogu's head pretty deep here, but he's trying to be observational in ways that I think Murderbot has a lot more interiority. So it is kind of a different experience. Yeah. So we have a new question. Are there any books, stories, authors you both view as required reading to write sci-fi?
No.
No. Yeah. Both of us just like immediately. No,
not at all. And yeah, actually, no one. You can just. There's the thing is you can come into this in so many different ways. Up to whatever the set of classics is now. Contemporary work is amazing in science fiction. And it's in so many media as well, so you can come into it from games and movies and shows and all of that. So there is no one way to, and that's true of any genre, right? There is no one true way to read it, no one true way to write it. And there's so many amazing books in so many different directions. Anyone is fine.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think to me, time is finite, and you should be reading, if you're reading to be a writer, that's cool, but read stuff that you're going to enjoy. That's really the ultimate thing here, is you should be reading whatever it is that you are going to enjoy reading. Don't force yourself to read particular stuff out of canon. Don't force yourself to read books that everyone else loves but that you're not really into. Read the things you want to read, because that's going to potentially be the things you want to write. And just lean into that. Life is short.
Yeah, and it's also another major factor here is that the set of books, the set of genres, the set of styles, whatever else that we have access to is determined so much by the cultural bubble that we grew up in, wherever in the world we are.
Yeah.
So there are just so many more writers. Like the internet exposed me to so many more amazing writers, but I also know that there are just thousands and thousands of writers who I could potentially love, whose I haven't even heard of now.
Yep.
So when it comes to your work, Valerie, and I love your books, or Martha Wells, who I only started reading fairly recently.
Yeah.
A lot of that was just because I had because the marketing mechanisms of these books do not reach a lot of people. And despite say Martha writing for so many years, I only got to learn of her books fairly recently, and now I'm burning through the back catalog as I read everything and loving it. So there's no standard way for people to hear about books anywhere in the world, and that's very sad, because whenever when I read your first book, Valerie, I immediately was, where is the TV show of this, and why have I not seen it? And I feel that way about so many of the writers that I'm reading nowadays, because now there is more information. So, and it's yet another reason I feel very sad that social media is kind of breaking right now, because it has been such an amazing source of just information about what people are shouting about in some new thing that they've read. And I feel like it's kind of going back to, you have to directly follow people or follow specific publishers or follow specific publications to find out. And so that kind of free form, not get kept, not filtered through a very specific point of view in terms of what is quality, what is literary quality in any genre, that's kind of going away again, and that's something I'm quite sad about.
Absolutely, because the discoverability thing is very tough. There are so many times that people will be like, why is nobody writing about X?
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a minute, here's a dozen books where people were writing about X, but how was anyone going to know about that? How was anyone going to find those books? Yeah.
A dozen books where people are writing about X. Now, another dozen books where people have been writing about X since the 1950s.
Yep.
And it's nobody's fault that they haven't heard of them.
No,
but
not at all.
I just feel like every story already exists, but it hasn't come to us.
Yeah. And like you said, we're losing the ability to find those things more easily. Like on social media, they could blow up, and now it's kind of like, well, now what are we going to do? So, look for things, friends. I guess that's the if you have a yum that you're attempting to fulfill, then look, ask, see, say, instead of saying, why is no one writing this, say, who is writing this? And you will probably get answers, and then you will have it and you'll be happy. So yeah. We do have a lighthearted question. Fan cast your books. Who plays who? Would you prefer live action or animation? And who voices the robots?
I think you'd have to go for this, Valerie.
Oh.
Let's do Where Peace is Lost, because I can't really cast jinn-bot. I'd love to, but I can't. It's mostly like robots. I'm
like, who would I cast for your book? I'm trying to think about it now. I'm like, the mom could be maybe like Shora from The Expanse, right?
Yes.
She can do disappointment so well. She has a very good I'm not mad, I'm disappointed, and also revolutionary. So like, I believe she could handle that.
But she's also one of those actors where she can play any of these characters. I don't care. Like I'll change the role myself with my own hands.
She could be the sex bot with Panir's wife. Like
too short. She can be the villains. She can be all of the villains.
Oh, she could be anyone. It's fine. She is amazing. Yeah. I don't know. For Where Peace is Lost, I like when I tend to fan cast, the problem is I'm usually writing characters who are beefy women, and there's fewer actresses like that than you would hope.
Assume a strict diet and workout regimen.
There you go. I'm just gonna
or prosthetics. Yeah. No, it's interesting because I actually when I was this was interesting to me because it felt like the characters, I didn't see the cultural specifics of the characters. Like I didn't see you kind of leaning into that. If you were, it was very subtly done. So, and it was interesting that it completely worked, but also, which is also why I can't cast it, because it feels like when it comes to kind of race and build and all of that, I've built stuff in my head that probably isn't what a movie studio would.
Yeah. It's like, who is even working right now? Are we gonna like cast backwards through time and be like, okay, it could be this person. Just like Luna is non-binary Luke Skywalker. Like Like, I don't know. We're redheaded though. Yeah, no, it's interesting to try to fish around and be like, all right, who in the past, who in the present, who in the future? We don't know who's coming up. All the baby actors. And as we get older, it's kind of like, yeah, it could be this person, and then you realize, oh, they're like 50, and my character's 25. Whoopsie doodle. And you're just trying to pivot and figure that out. But yeah, no, I'm trying to think of like who else, like who would be Moku in this. And I don't know, because the benefit of having a robot character is that it can be played by virtually anyone, and yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm interested to hear what other people think as they read this book, and then they can come back and be like, it's this actor, definitely, 100%. Because yeah, that'd be fun. We are rapidly approaching the end of our hour here, so does anyone have any other questions you want to get in before we wrap things up? Because let me see, what else did I have? I was just going to ask you about your dog, but
yeah, he's not here. I don't know what to say about him. He is really the owner of my heart, and
a good dog,
and now has a. But it's just he turned 7 this year, which means that he's now older than me. So I'm now, in addition to all the other kind of central roles he plays in my life, I'm now asking him for wisdom, and his wisdom is usually impeccable.
He's an elder statesman now among dogs.
Yeah. He's gone into his George Clooney era.
Oh my goodness! See, that's another actor where it's just like, yeah, George Clooney could wait a minute. He's like 400 years old. I don't know. There are so many things. Okay, so yeah, last chance, everybody, because otherwise we are going to wrap this up. We will say, buy the book now. There is a link underneath our faces at the bottom of your screen where you can purchase the book. And again, as was mentioned previously, grab it here so that you can support events like this, support your local small bookstores, your not so local small bookstores, and buying books means we can write more books, and that's a good sign.
Yay!
If you want more books, you got to buy them. Libraries are good too, but you're here and now. You want to have this book in your hot little hands. What if your library doesn't have it? What if there's a giant hold list? Forget about it. Just buy it, and then it's yours, and then you can have it like this. Shelf. Yeah.
Imagine holding this in your hands.
It's really good. It's real nice. The back cover is sweet. Like, no, this is a really good book, and it's really well put together. I immensely enjoyed reading it. So
I got very lucky with both my covers on.
It's super good.
The design department is just amazing. It's been the best.
Not made by.
It's a beautiful entrance.
The physical display that we have for you all in the front of the store, your covers are so pretty. And it's just like, oh, they look so, I've been enjoying looking at it. So thank you both for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for speaking, for coming and answering some of my silly questions and other people's. I mean, Mia Tsai was in there. But again, I'll repeat it again. Purchase this book here. And you know what? If you go to the event page, you can also get Valerie's book. We have them all. We have all of them listed right there. You can just log in. Ooh. Tap, tap, tap. Get them all. It'll be perfect. We'll send them to you.
Yay.
And then you can actually read about all the different wonderful characters that are in here. And you can know what that secret is, what that story plot is that we weren't able to hear about on this conversation.
And then you can find me on social media, and we can talk to each other about it. We can shriek about it together. I would
definitely appreciate that. Get in touch. But thank you all. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Samit. Thank you for being here and for taking the time and talking through this gorgeous story as well as yours. I know Samit was very making sure we all knew where Pieces Lost is also involved, and I love that. It's incredible. It's exactly the way to. So you did it to me, an incredible event. I loved hearing everything you had to say. I really enjoyed all the very thoughtful answers. And then all the answers were like, no, read what you want, enjoy what you want. Because that's so important. And also such an important reminder for like how to take up space. If you have a story, write that story.
Heck yeah.
And I think that's a gorgeous place to send us off, also with thoughts of Dot.
I do want to say thank you so much, Mysterious Galaxy. Thank you, Franny. This is my second event with you guys now, and it's just been an absolute pleasure. And Valerie, thank you. You were just the best person to talk to at any point. Thank you for doing this.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Been such a delight. I'm going to say goodbye to the people in chat. You'll be able to find this if you want to rewatch it on the event page. And have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to end the broadcast. I can do this. Bye.